Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the GSL-English Podcast. My name is Gideon, and this is a podcast for all learners of English to practice and improve in a relaxed and natural way. And in this episode, we are going to talk about doing nothing. Okay, when was the last time you did nothing? And by nothing, I mean absolutely nothing. I don't mean sitting on the sofa, scrolling on your phone. I don't mean reading a book. I don't mean writing down a list of jobs that you've got to do whilst having a cup of tea. I mean literally doing nothing. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the forgotten art of doing nothing, because we live in such a fast-paced society and world these days that actually the idea of doing nothing is almost an alien concept, isn't it? So that's the theme of today's podcast. And of course, as always, as we go through, we're going to break down the vocabulary that we look at. We're going to give you some new expressions, give you a chance to practice your listening skills. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, you could even, if you so wish, practice your reading skills and pronunciation by repeating after me. Do whatever you want with this podcast. I don't care, as long as you watch it to the end, because that always helps me out. So if you are new here, welcome, as I said. My name is Gideon. I create these British English podcasts to help best prepare you for real life situations in English. So I present the English language to you in a real and authentic way. So these episodes are not scripted, so to speak. We always have themes, we have topics that we're going to talk about, but I try and speak in a natural and realistic way so you'll be best prepared and also help you to speak natural and fluent English. So yeah, give it a subscribe. So if you are a returning viewer or listener, thank you as always. I very, very much appreciate it. But before we get into it, I hope you're doing well. I hope you've had a good week wherever you are in the world, whatever you have been doing. Here in England, we're still having a bit of a heat wave. It's currently 28 degrees. So it's very hot. I am back in my office, which is unbelievably hot up here. It's warm. I think as well because when I'm recording, I close all the curtains and everything. All the windows are shut and I have no aircon in here. Nowhere in England has aircon. I've had many people ask me that since last week's episode where I spoke about it being hot. A lot of people said, well, just turn on the air conditioning. Our houses were not designed to deal with heat here in England. We don't have air conditioning units built in. We have radiators, ready for cold winters, ready for those cold days that England is used to. But due to the world changing, the climate changing and global warming, England just seems to be getting hotter and hotter each summer. So you never know. Maybe there's going to be a boom in sales of aircon units here in England. But yeah, still very hot, but we can't complain. It's nice. Had some nice pub lunches, had some nice pints out, had some nice walks. Last Friday, went to the beach with my wife. We had a lovely day. It was good. Played mini golf. Of course I won. What other outcome is there? But yeah, so it is warm here in England. It is warm, but trying to make the most of it rather than complaining, which is our natural kind of default response as a British person. Let's complain. I'm trying not to do that. So there you go. Let me know how your week's been. I do genuinely want to know. Let me know how your week's been. Let me know where you are, what you've been doing. You know, don't worry if it's not that interesting. Just let me know anyway. Or even just say hello in the comments. I will get back to you. I will always reply to as many comments as I can. So yeah, say hi, say hello, introduce yourself. So when was the last time you did nothing? I tried to think back to the last time that I did nothing and I couldn't remember. The last time that I actually simply, intentionally did nothing. I think when I was younger, I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 1990, so my childhood was in the 90s, my teens were in the 2000s. I can think back then to times when I just did nothing. You know what I mean? Like, for example, staring out of a window when it's raining, choosing a raindrop that was going to win the race down the window, or just staring out, daydreaming at trees. I seemed to do that a lot when I was younger. And I started to think, is it just because you get older that you stop doing nothing? And I don't think that's the answer. As we're going to see from the article we're going to go through, the answer is really that we live in such a fast-paced, hyper-connected world that actually doing nothing is almost frowned upon. If something is frowned upon, it's you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do it. Don't do it. And we live in a world now where actually doing nothing is almost seen as lazy. If you just take time to do nothing, what are you doing with your life? You should be out there. You should be working hard. So that's the idea today. And we're going to talk about, is it wrong to sometimes just do nothing? Is there really a problem with that? So that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to talk about the forgotten art of doing nothing. So we've got a whole text that we're going to read. We're going to take it paragraph by paragraph. So, at this point, if you want to pause the video, you want to grab a cup of tea, grab a coffee, a glass of wine, a beer, whatever you want, grab some food, do it now. This is a nice and relaxing episode. If you want to read along with me, please do. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, a great way of practicing your pronunciation is by listening to me read and then repeating after me by pausing the video. You can do that sentence by sentence. You can do that by paragraph, whatever tickles your fancy, whatever you want to do. But just a little idea there. If you do want to practice your speaking skills as well. And of course, if you are listening on Spotify, then just enjoy. We've got some good vocabulary today. So here we go. The forgotten art of doing nothing. In today's fast-paced, hyper-connected world, doing nothing has become almost unthinkable. If you sit quietly with no phone in your hands, no screen in front of you, and no clear purpose to your time, people may assume you're bored, lazy, or wasting precious minutes. But what if doing nothing is not a sign of idleness, but of wisdom? So we're introduced here to the situation in our world. It describes it as fast-paced. If something is fast-paced, it's moving, changing quickly, constantly busy. That's life, isn't it? Life today is extremely fast-paced. Sometimes you might watch a fast-paced movie or film. Everything's happening, changing quickly. It's constantly busy. So we do live in a fast-paced world. We also live in a hyper-connected world. And by hyper-connected, we mean that we are always connected through digital technology in some way. When you think about it, if you want to watch this podcast, spend some time with me, the click of a button, you're there. If you want to phone a friend in Tanzania, you can. If you want to, sell some stocks and shares and invest, you can do it within minutes. We are constantly, at the click of a button, connected in some way. And we call that hyper-connected in a digital way. And because of that hyper-connected, the fast-paced world we're living in, doing nothing has almost become unthinkable, meaning that we don't even think about it. The idea of doing nothing doesn't even come into our minds. We don't entertain it. And it's true, isn't it, that if you see someone sitting quietly, they've got no phone in their hand, they've got no screen in front of them, no clear purpose, sometimes you look at them thinking, are they all right? Are they bored? Are they lazy? What a waste of time. So what about, we're going to entertain the idea that if doing nothing is not a sign of idleness, and by idleness we're talking about the state of being inactive, not working, no motion. So being idle, doing nothing. That doing nothing, it's not a sign of just being inactive, not working hard, but maybe it's a sign of wisdom, of understanding, of insight, of, what's the word I'm thinking of? Of comfort, or contentment. So that's the idea that we're going to dive into. We live in an age that worships productivity. From motivational quotes on social media to apps that track your every move, the message is clear. Every second should be maximized, monetized, or optimized. Rest, silence, and idleness are seen as problems to be solved rather than valuable states of being. So it's true, isn't it? We do live in a world that worships productivity. And productivity, is the idea of making the most of your times, doing tasks efficiently, effectively, making every minute count. And it's true, isn't it? When you scroll on social media, there's this kind of underlying message that if you want to be a truly great human, if you want to be truly successful, then every second should be maximized, made as large or effective as possible. Everything should be monetized, You haven't got time to do nothing. You should be turning everything into money. Or everything should be optimized. It should be perfect. It should be efficient. It should be the best it can possibly be. And that's the world that we live in. And that is kind of the agenda that's pushed across, isn't it? And because of that, kind of this idea of just taking a step back, taking time to simply do nothing, is almost looked down on. Rest, silence, and idleness, they're almost seen as issues, they're almost seen as problems, rather than something valuable, a great state of being. A state of being is the condition or the existence or experience. It goes on to say, but this wasn't always the case. Throughout history, people across cultures have recognized the importance of stillness. Ancient Greek philosophers, Buddhist monks, and 19th century poets all made time for contemplation and daydreaming. The Dutch even have a word for it, niksen. The art of doing nothing for no purpose other than to rest and simply be. So this idea, that doing nothing is bad, wasn't always the case. And when we go back through history, we see that many cultures, many beliefs have recognized the importance of stillness, complete quiet or lack of movement. Sometimes you look at a lake in the morning and it is completely still. There's nothing going on. Complete quiet, complete lack of movement. We need that as humans, don't we? Even Greek philosophers, Buddhists, 19th century poets, whatever, they all took time for contemplation, deep, reflective thought to contemplate, and daydreaming. Daydreaming is a fantastic thing to do that, unfortunately, I think as we get older, we don't do anywhere near as much as we should. Letting your mind just drift into imagination. I remember as a kid, because I've always been, as many of you know, I love cars. I've always been into cars. And I remember seeing this beautiful car on the motorway. I can't quite remember what it was. I can vividly remember daydreaming about driving that car, owning that car, parking that car in a garage that I didn't have, in a home I didn't have yet. But just daydreaming, letting your mind drift into imagination. And what I love is this Dutch word, niksen. So they even have a word for this idea of doing nothing. Niksen is doing nothing on purpose. Just resting or being. Just to simply be. Now, I racked my brains. I did a lot of research just to find whether we here in England, or in the English language, had a similar term. I couldn't find anything that had this term in a positive sense. For example, we might talk about being idle, but often we talk about idle hands or being bone idle in a negative way. Come on, get up, do something. But I don't think we have a term just for doing nothing. niksen. And maybe that's one of the problems. We don't even have a word for it. That's how much of a foreign idea it is to us. And I've been through this topic with a few students, private students this week. And I said to them, can you think of anything? And a few other languages did have similar terms, but I think this word, this Dutch word niksen, puts it perfectly. By the way, if I am, do not take my pronunciation of that word as fixed. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. But what a great term. Nixon. Doing nothing on purpose. Just being. So what does doing nothing actually mean? Doing nothing doesn't necessarily mean sitting in a dark room staring at a wall, although it could. It means allowing your mind to wander without trying to achieve anything. It might look like sitting quietly with a cup of tea, staring out of a train window, watching the clouds roll by, listening to the birds outside, letting your thoughts come and go without judgment. It's a space where you're not consuming media, solving problems, or completing tasks. You're just allowing yourself to exist without pressure. So when we talk about this idea of doing nothing, it's not the idea of sitting in complete darkness. No, it's really not as complicated as that. It could be if you want it to be. But this idea of doing nothing, it's not to be overdeveloped. It's not to be over-analysed. Just let your mind wander. Sit down, have a cup of tea. Don't look at your phone and just think. Staring out of a train window, looking at what you see. Watching the clouds roll by. Listening to birds. Letting your thoughts come and go without judgment. So I did a little experiment. I thought, let me try this. So I sat down on my sofa and I thought, I'm just going to try doing nothing. Sitting on my sofa, just staring out the window, and I realised a real issue with myself because within 2 minutes I was hoovering the living room. That's not a great place to be, is it? I thought, no, I should be okay with just doing nothing. It should be all right. I shouldn't feel like I have to fill the time. Of course, I think with this topic there is balance, isn't there? If you're constantly in this state of Nixon, if you're constantly in this state of doing nothing, then you need to get up and work hard. But it's having a balance. So this idea of doing nothing, it's a space where you're not consuming media, as we always are in this world. You're not solving problems. We've always got problems to solve, haven't we? We've always got things to fix. You're not completing tasks, not completing jobs. You're just allowing yourself to exist without pressure. Not feeling forced to perform, to achieve, to accomplish. That's what doing nothing is. It's not this idea of, it's not to be overcomplicated. It's just doing nothing. When was the last time you did that? So it raises a question. Why are we so uncomfortable with stillness, with Nixon, with doing nothing? Modern life trains us to avoid boredom at all costs. Think about the last time you stood in a queue or waited for a friend to arrive. What did you do? Most of us instinctively reach for our phones. We scroll through social media, check the news, or open an app, not out of need, but habit. It's true, isn't it? Modern life, the world that we live in, it trains us. It kind of pushes us in the direction that you cannot be bored. Avoid boredom at all costs. If we're bored, it's the feeling of being uninterested, unstimulated. We have to be stimulated by something. Something has to be going into our minds. So it raises a question, think about the last time you stood in a queue, or you waited for a friend, or you waited for a bus, whatever it is. What did you do? Did you just stand there, sit there, watch life go by? Or did you do what most of us do, and that is to instinctively reach for our phones? Now, if we do something instinctively, we do it through instinct. Not thinking, it's our automatic response. Without thinking, it's what our body just does. And it's true, isn't it? We naturally reach for our phones. And I did a little bit of research on this too. A little test we can all do to see if we are instinctively reaching for our phones is go out somewhere. Don't take your phone. So I don't know, maybe walk to the coffee shop or give your friend your phone, give your partner your phone, whatever, and see how many times you instinctively reach for your phone out of your pocket, out of your bag. I gave this a try, and it was a real eye-opener for me. I couldn't believe how many times I instinctively just went for my phone. It was my natural reaction. And we do that because we've kind of been trained to not be okay with doing nothing. If you're standing in a queue, we can't be bored. We don't want to look like a weirdo just not doing anything. So what do? We reach for our phones, not because we need them, but out of habit, out of routine behaviour. And that's just because what we regularly do. Our devices are engineered, specifically designed a certain way, to fill every spare moment. Algorithms keep feeding us endless content, giving our brains constant stimulation. This can feel good in the short term, but over time, it robs us of something essential: mental space. So algorithms, they are like the digital formulas that determine what content you see. So for example, your Instagram feed is designed to push content that you will find interesting. So you keep on watching. And all of ours is different. What you see on Instagram and YouTube will be very different to what I see, unless we have similar interests. That's an algorithm. It's the formula that determines the content that you see, and it is designed to push content out that you're going to want to watch. And therefore you spend, of course, more time on that device. And the idea is to give our brains constant stimulation, activate, excite the mind. And this feels good in the short term. But over time, when we're constantly feeding ourselves with all of this information, all of this media, all of this content, all of this stimulation, it starts to not allow any room for mental space. And here, by mental space, we're talking about room in your mind for calm, for peace, for rest, reflection. Kind of everything that we're taught is just to fill that space. But maybe we need to open that space back up. The hidden power of idleness. Neuroscientists have discovered something fascinating. When our brains are not focused on a task, they don't shut off. They switch to what's called the default mode network. This is the part of the brain that lights up during daydreaming, memory retrieval, and self-reflection. So neuroscientists, scientists who study the brain and nervous systems, they've discovered something fascinating, that when our brains are not focused on a task, when you just sit there not doing anything, it doesn't mean that your brain's switching off, which is kind of what we think, isn't it? When somebody's daydreaming, we think that they've just switched off, like a computer that's off. Actually, what's happened is they've switched to this default mode network. And that is the brain activity pattern that turns on during rest. And actually, it doesn't switch off. I like the way it puts this. It lights up. There's a part of the brain that when we're in this mode, it lights up. So when we're daydreaming, when we're just thinking about memories, when we're self-reflecting, thinking about your own thoughts, your own actions, your own feelings, often not in an intentional way, you're just doing nothing, and that's the thought process that's coming and going. You're not switching off. The part of that brain is lighting up, and that's healthy. Because in this mode, we often make connections we hadn't noticed before. We come up with creative ideas. We think through problems in fresh ways and process our emotions. In fact, many of our Eureka moments, those sudden flashes of insight, happen not when we're trying to solve a problem, but when we're walking, showering, or staring into space. So, it talks about the connections that we make in this mode, the links between thoughts, ideas. And it's true, isn't it? Often when you're doing nothing, you come up with great ideas. You come up with creative ideas. You think about problems in fresh ways. You process your emotions. And then it talks about many of our Eureka moments. A Eureka moment is a sudden realization or a brilliant insight or Eureka! I've thought about it, I've got it. A sudden flash of insight. We often have those moments not when we're sitting down with pen and paper at a computer trying to solve those problems, but when we're in that doing nothing mode. When we're walking, when we're just showering, when we're staring into space, when we're staring out a window, when we're sitting there with a cup of tea listening to the birds. Eureka. That's when we get those moments. In other words, doing nothing isn't a waste of time. It's a powerful source of clarity and creativity. In this instance here, if something is clear, you can see through it. Mental clearness and understanding and creativity, the ability to think of new and original ideas. Burnout is becoming increasingly common. Burnout is that state of extreme exhaustion, often from overwork, overused brains. It's becoming more and more common. And once you burn out, it takes a while to get over it. If you've been through it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you burn out, it's a real bumpy road to get back to normality. And even when we're not working, we are rarely truly resting. We are bombarded with notifications, messages, and distractions. Our brains never get a chance to recharge. It's true, isn't it, that we never really rest because we're always bombarded with something. If you're bombarded, there's tons of it being thrown at you. Too much input. It's overwhelming. Notifications, messages, emails, blah, 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 blah. We're just bombarded constantly. So our brains never get a chance really to recharge, to rest, regain energy, and just create that mental space. Making space for intentional idleness can be deeply healing. It helps lower stress levels, regulate emotions, and improve our focus when we return to our tasks. It teaches us to be present, to notice the world around us, and to reconnect with ourselves. Intentional idleness. If we do something intentionally, it is thought through. We do it on purpose. So here is that intentional idleness, purposely doing nothing to rest. And this is good for us. It lowers stress levels, helps us to regulate our emotions, manage our feelings in a balanced way. But also, it teaches us to be present, to be fully aware and engaged in the moment that we are in. I'm not saying that it's got to be groundbreaking, but if you're queuing up for a coffee, this intentional idleness just helps us to be present in the moment. Doing nothing doesn't have to be formal or structured. It can be as simple as lying on your bed for 10 minutes and watching the light move across the ceiling. If something is formal or structured, it has a set plan, a set system, a way it should be done. But that's not what we're talking about when we're doing nothing. It's just taking 5 minutes on your bed, watching the light move across the ceiling. It's simple. It's easy. It's uncomplicated. At first, doing nothing can feel uncomfortable. You might feel fidgety. If we're fidgety, we're restless, unable to stay still. Or you might feel guilty, feel bad. I should be doing something. I should be doing something productive. This is bad of me. Or you might feel as though you're slacking off, avoiding work or intentionally avoiding responsibility. Well, it's normal to have those feelings. But it takes time to unlearn our conditioning. Conditioning are learned patterns of behaviour from society or experience. So here are a few gentle ways to ease into it. I'm just going to read these out to you and see if any of them appeal to you. Schedule mini pauses. Set aside 5 or 10 minutes in your day to simply sit with no agenda. No plans, no list of things to do, no phone, no book, no distractions. Just breathe and observe your surroundings. The second suggestion is let yourself be bored. Don't rush to fill every dull moment. If you're on a train or waiting in line, resist the urge to scroll. Instead, look around. What do you notice? Go for a walk without your phone. A short walk with no music or podcasts, except the GSL-English Podcast because it's amazing, can feel surprisingly refreshing. Listen to your thoughts. Notice your environment and let your mind drift. If it drifts, it moves slowly or gently from one thing to another. And the last suggestion, lie down and do absolutely nothing. I like this one. Not a nap. A nap is just a short sleep. Just lie down and allow your thoughts to come and go. If you fall asleep, that's fine too. Your body might need it. We often think of freedom as the ability to do whatever we want. But true freedom might also mean freeing ourselves from the constant need to be stimulated, mentally or emotionally excited. It means choosing to pause, to be still, to be quiet, to do nothing. So next time you find yourself with a spare moment, instead of filling it with noise, try leaving it open. Let your mind breathe. Let your attention rest. You may discover that those moments of stillness are not empty at all. They are full of life, waiting to be felt. I really liked this article, and I would honestly, genuinely really like to get your opinions on it as well, because I can't remember the last time I did nothing, and the fact that I find it difficult to do nothing shows to me that I'm a little bit out of balance. What do you think? When was the last time you sat down and did nothing intentionally, without feeling guilty, without feeling fidgety? Let me know in the comments. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. Lots of good vocabulary there. You seem to really enjoy these kind of the episodes that are focused around our thought process, our personalities. As I always say, I'm no professional. We're just learning about all this stuff together. But life is crazy. Life is busy. Maybe we just got to be a little bit more okay with doing nothing. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much as always for watching and listening and engaging with the podcast. I genuinely do appreciate it. So there you go. I hope you guys have an amazing week. Stay safe wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you all next Sunday. Have a good one, guys.